We're going to be playing with the different energies and intentions behind empathy and compassion. I know that many of you are very empathic and have been since you were children, perhaps from the very moment you exited your mother's womb and came into this world. And that empathy is a profound and beautiful gift, because what it means is that you have the greatness of heart to be able to feel, see, sense, hear, know, and understand whatever is going on with people, with animals around you, perhaps even within specific communities that you are tuned into, and even strangers far afield, as well as the planet as a whole. I know personally, because I have always been very empathic since childhood, and this has meant that I've always been able to feel and sense the feelings of others, to feel and sense the heavy processes within others, even if they were, as it happened to be in my family, very camouflaged or hidden or even unconscious. And this was, in many ways in my life, a cause of much trauma. Because sometimes when we are empathic, it also means we know, see, understand the truth of things as they are, and not necessarily what our parents or our family members or our community or society tells us is true. Because we feel, we know that actually whatever we're being told is true is an untruth. So let me unpack empathy a little bit more, because empathy also means that we pick up other people's joy and happiness and peace. How wonderful! And that is wonderful. And at the same time, what we really each want and need in our lives is to feel, have that joy and happiness and peace be within us. Because sometimes, particularly when we are very empathic and so attuned into what is going on with others, then our own happiness or unhappiness gets very deeply entrained into other people's unhappiness and happiness. And this can be very, very destabilizing. Over the years, I've had many students and clients share with me that they so easily pick up energies from other people just going to the grocery store, and that it is very, very unsettling and destabilizing. Or alternatively, because their intuitive gifts expand out beyond the visible, the seen world, the physical world, they may even be picking up on the heavy energies of spirit beings, of people who are deceased but who have not gone to the light. And so they find themselves bombarded, and they don't really know how to work with this. Empathy is actually simply a doorway. Empathy is an expression of the heart. Empathy is just a piece of, or an entry into, compassion. So let me talk about compassion. It sometimes happens when I'm with a client who has had a terribly, terribly difficult life, or they're having a terribly hard time in their life, and there's a lot of upset, there's a lot of intensity, and then even as I do the energy work, there is a very, very intense release of heavy energies from their light body and from deep within their subconscious, their psyche. And sometimes clients will say to me, well, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want you, I'm worried that you're going to take this on, and I don't want you to do that. And I truly appreciate this aspiration on the part of my clients. But what I always say to them is, please do not worry, because I do not take it on. I think perhaps at the beginning of my work as an energy healer, and even before that, when I was developing and teaching classes at the University of Virginia, dealing with collective harms and traumas, such as slavery and racism, that this empathy that I had was, yes, a way to feel into something in order to know it. Because that's what empathy gives us. Empathy gives us a knowing. It is a truism that we can't know what we haven't experienced, or we don't know what we don't know. And in order to know something, not up here in the mind, but to know something in our heart, is to actually experience it. So empathy for me was a very powerful way to enter into spaces, experiences of suffering, of pain, in order to, in some small part, know it, as if I had experienced it myself. Now, one thing that is true about empathy is that often the process that we are able to connect into empathically actually is a mirror of something we have experienced. And it can certainly be said that if we have experienced trauma of any kind, whether it's family trauma or trauma from war or violence or cultural traumas like racism or sexism, homophobia, and so on, that it means that perhaps if we're able to hold that without fear, we will then be able to understand and know it empathically as we connect to others. But herein lies the problem, is that empathy is not a big enough container. If we are taking in other people's pain, whether that's our family members, friends, or even taking on the pain of the world, and yes, some of us can feel that empathically, we ourselves personally are not a big enough container to hold that. And in fact, over time, if we aren't able to have these energies, these processes move through us and out of us, we can actually personally become sick, unbalanced, unharmonized. We can get what is known as compassion fatigue. And a part of us can shut down. The goal is not to take it all into ourselves, but to use that knowing to then expand into compassion. So let me return to when a client says to me, I'm so afraid you're going to take this on and you're going to have trouble or become sick or whatever. The truth is that the empathy that allowed me to move into other people's experiences, into the experiences of our collective humanity of trauma and hardship, gave me the capacity to sit in the presence of that pain and suffering, but eventually to learn how to not have it stay in me. It became compassion. Now, empathy can be learned. It is often also inherited. Compassion can be inherited, a quality of being that can be inherited, but it is also something that can be learned and practiced. Compassion is the ability to be in the presence of, to witness suffering of all kinds, to witness the confusion and the ignorance of other human beings, and to hold it in a very large container of love. Empathy, in a sense, needs to be grounded in love. And then the ground of love becomes compassion. This is why a core practice for you in the weeks ahead will be the Cherokee Heart Chant. Because the Cherokee Heart Chant activates the vibrational frequency of compassion. For the open heart is compassionate. The open heart, like God, the open heart, which is God force within us, is ever wise and compassionate, with loving detachment. And don't misunderstand the word detachment. Detachment doesn't mean not caring. Detachment means merely in this context to have an energetic vibrational frequency whereby we are not channeling that pain through our own body, psyche, soul, energy body, but it is being channeled through source, through spirit. So in this module, we're going to begin building that container, making it bigger and bigger, wider, going from empathy to compassion, anchoring in caring, and yet also remaining in a space of freedom. I imagine, and I can only imagine, since I myself am not enlightened, that in fact this is a practice towards enlightenment. For I believe from being in the presence of a few enlightened beings in my life and having some very short windows where my consciousness opened and I felt myself as enlightened, that this is actually what enlightenment feels like. So even while we are building this capacity within us, we're doing it both to alleviate our own suffering, to have greater love and compassion for ourselves, but also to continue on the path towards awakened consciousness, enlightenment. So, let's go. There's no time to to lose. Welcome. I'm here to talk about the joy in compassion. Compassion is very misunderstood. One of the things that those of us who are probably very empathic, who have a deep caring and concern for the suffering of others, loved ones, family, friends, strangers, and even the world, we often experience that as pain. We often experience it as burdensome, as heavy, which of course it is. It is burdensome, it is heavy, and it is hard. But the other fact is that when we widen compassion out into a greater ripple around us, through us, there's a huge amount of joy, there's a huge amount of freedom, and there's deep understanding of the greater purpose, movements through all the experiences of life, both the hard and the joyful, the triumphs and the challenges. This is the keynote of compassion. It holds it all so that we experience it all. It isn't just pain and suffering, because actually, although I know as I say this, that there are people right now in the world who are living lives of incredible pain and suffering that is unremitting, endless, whether it is something that is within their own minds, their own emotions, their own bodies, or whether it is due to causes and conditions in the outer world, like poverty or domestic abuse or war or genocide or any of these harms. So I want to make sure that it is understood that I'm not being airy-fairy about this, because that does exist. And also that for those of us who may have more comfort, more privilege, more freedom, we can actually really use these practices to expand ourselves. And even if we are in a difficult situation, these practices can also help us, even in the midst of the greatest suffering, be more free. What do I mean by that? In my own personal life, when I was miserable, when my life was a war zone, this was in my 30s, on every front, work, in my family, with my mother, with my marriage, and even in my body, which was in a lot of pain, it was the practice of compassion, the practices of love light, of loving kindness that began to create a little bit of a window through which my pain and suffering was alleviated. My mind and my emotions, little by little, became more and more free. And then this beautiful golden thread, this beautiful energy cord that I had activated through these practices, I then followed it intently in order to create more and more light, more and more spaciousness within me, so that eventually, even in my outer life, there began to be more and more spaciousness. There was less inner turmoil. I was no longer being triggered by old traumas, by events that were familiar or seemed the same. My mind became more clear. I had more discernment into understanding what was the truth and what was a projection of my own trauma outward. So what we're going to do is play here with this energy of empathy first. How does it feel? And then we're going to play with the energy of compassion. We're going to do this through three separate practices. One, the practice of mindful connection to the body, and two, anchoring in what I call the sacred witness, where we can observe arising sensations, emotions, feelings within ourselves with kind detachment. The second then is to feel into, with our natural empathy, into a situation within ourselves or in another where there is pain and suffering. And then to bring that in the third practice into the container of compassion through love light, meditation, and aspiration. So this is what we're going to be doing in these three parts here today. Feel free to post your comments and reflections on all of this, and then let's go. Let's start the practices.